The first pair of meaningful manufacturing technologies are pottery and copper. Fired pottery enabled us to store our harvest for the lean seasons, while copper is the first metal we were able to forge into tools, the first of which were sickles to help us harvest wheat. The equipment required to forge this pair of products isn't particularly onerous. Clay can be shaped by hand or with a pottery wheel if you're extra fancy, whereas copper can be smelted from ore if it is heated in, you guessed it, a clay pot. Once you've got your copper metal, it's simply a matter of beating it with a rock into whatever shape you find relevant. Early manufacturing wouldn't have felt all that out of place at a retiree pottery class. Bit by bit, we got better, both at working materials and at pioneering the use of new ones. Copper sickles gave way to bronze scythes. Clay pots gave way to ceramics. Bronze spears gave way to iron swords. Wooden mugs gave way to glass bottles. Wool thread gave way to cotton cloth. But in a way, everything from the dawn of civilization right up to the 1700s shared a certain characteristic: organizational simplicity. There was no Home Depot to run to repeatedly to source parts. Most things you made yourself. If you were lucky, you had a blacksmith neighbor, but even his supply system couldn't be confused with complexity. It was one dude, a forge, a hammer, some tongs, and a barrel of water. If he had an eye for the future, he had an assistant and an apprentice, and that was about it. Such cottage industries faced extreme limitations. Blacksmiths and skilled folks like them couldn't just go out to the town square and recruit labor. They had to train it for years. There was no rapid technological progress. There were no rapid capacity build-outs. The Industrial Revolution changed the math in three critical ways. First, the Industrial Revolution not only gifted us with steel, less brittle, more workable, and more durable than iron, it gifted us with huge volumes of steel so that workers could access the raw metal without having to forge it themselves. With that messy, expensive, dangerous step taken care of, skilled workers could focus on adding value and specializing further. For the first time in human history, specialists in multiple fields could meaningfully collaborate. Interaction brought advancement. Second, the Industrial Revolution brought us precision manufacturing, both in tools and molds. One of the major drawbacks of cottage industry is that no two parts are exactly the same, so no two finished products are exactly the same. If something breaks, there is no plugging in a replacement piece. Either the entire item had to be chucked, or it needed to be taken to a skilled smith to craft a fundamentally new customized part. In war, this was particularly annoying. Muskets were great and all, but if a single piece malfunctioned, you were left with an expensive, low-quality club. Advancements in precision did an end run around this restriction. Now, identical parts could be made by the dozen, or 1,000. For the first time in human history, manufacturing had scale. Third, the Industrial Revolution brought us fossil fuels. We've already covered their role in generating power and enabling us to move beyond muscle and water, but there's far more to oil and coal than that. Derivatives of the pair of power fuels often have nothing to do with energy at all. Paints, pigments, antibiotics, solvents, painkillers, nylon, detergents, glass, inks, fertilizers, plastics. For the first time in human history, we didn't take a minor step forward as we did from bronze to iron. We instead experienced an explosion in material science applications. The three improvements dovetail nicely. If skilled workers don't need to master every single step, they can get really good at one or two. Bam! Increasingly diverse skill sets and increasingly complex products. Apply that hyper-skill capacity to a larger scale, and nearly any product can be produced en masse. Bam! Assembly lines, machinery, automobiles, and telephones. Apply those concepts to dozens of new materials, and the entirety of the human condition is remade. Bam! Modern medicine, high-rise cities, advanced agriculture. Taken together, these three improvements in specialization, in scale, and in product reach changed the math of the possible and gave us our first real glimpse of what we today recognize as manufacturing. There were still plenty of limitations. Not every place had good coal or good iron ore or all the other industrial inputs, and trade remained a dubious business. If you were dependent upon a foreign sovereign for something you needed, it wasn't simply about you trusting him or her in order to get the necessary inputs. It wasn't even about trusting him or her all the time. It was about you trusting all foreign sovereigns all the time. Any power that could reach into any part of any supply chain could wreck the whole thing, often inadvertently. Out of necessity and practicality, all manufacturing of all types was kept in-house. That naturally benefited certain geographies. Economies of scale are impossible with a skilled labor force of one. Industrialization enabled the development of industrial plants that would A, enable skilled labor to multiply their efforts by having each worker specialize on a specific task or part, and B, enable unskilled labor to come in and work the assembly lines. With the industrial code cracked, the questions became, how big could that industrial plant get? Just how specialized could the skilled workers become? How much territory and population could you access within your own system? In sussing that out, the old math of transport came into play. Any geography that could shuttle goods and people about in the pre-industrial age could now shuttle about intermediate goods. In addition to all their other advantages, the imperial systems with good internal geographies could now generate manufacturing, enabling economies of scale that others could only dream of. The first really big winner was Canal Britain, followed by Germany's Ruhr Valley and ultimately the American Steel Belt.